The night was too quiet for December. In the small town of Brookhaven, where the snow usually swallowed up all sound, tonight's stillness felt unnatural, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. Streetlights flickered against the falling snowflakes, turning the world into a haze of yellow and white. Yet inside a modest red brick house at the end of Carver Street, that silence was broken by the hum of secrets pressing against the walls. Alina Harris, 39, shifted in the living room chair, her thick frame leaning forward as if she could push herself deeper into the shadows. Her dark curls, frizzed from the damp air, clung stubbornly to her forehead. She was not a woman who blended into silence easily. Her presence usually filled the room with warmth, laughter, or, when necessary, fire. But tonight, her wide brown eyes glistened with something between fear and determination. The weight she carried on her body, in her heart, in her memories had never felt heavier. She had been waiting for this night for months. The Harris family was large, tight-knit, and proud of its reputation in town. They owned Harris & Sons Construction, a business Elena's late father-in-law had built from nothing. Her husband, Marcus, ran it now. To outsiders, the Harrises were a dynasty of hard work and respectability. Inside the family, Elena knew, rot had been spreading for years. Tonight, on Christmas Eve, when everyone gathered for the annual dinner, Elena planned to expose that rot. She rose to her feet, pacing across the carpet. Her dress, burgundy velvet that hugged her generous curves, felt stifling, though she had chosen it carefully. She wanted to look confident, unshaken, when the storm began. At 39, Elena was not the glamorous type of woman magazines celebrated. She was soft around the edges, with strong arms that bore the marks of a life of work and care. But tonight, she needed to be more than a caretaker. She needed to be a reckoning. The clock chimed 7. Her daughter, Leela, age 16, peeked her head from the hallway. "Mom, are you okay? You've been pacing forever." Elena forced a smile, though her lips trembled. "I'm fine, baby. Just thinking." Leela's gaze lingered. She had Marcus's eyes, sharp, almond-shaped butt, Elena's rounded cheeks. The girl was smart, too smart sometimes. Elena worried she saw more than she let on. "Come on," Elena whispered, smoothing her daughter's curls. "It's time. We can't keep them waiting." The Harris estate was only a 15-minute drive away, but for Elena, it felt like entering another world. The mansion stood on a hill, every window glowing with holiday light. From the driveway, one could already hear the chatter, the music, the laughter spilling out. The family always hosted Christmas Eve in grandeur, as though joy could be measured by extravagance. Inside, the scene was dazzling. Garlands draped over stairwells, a towering Christmas tree glittering with glass ornaments, and tables covered with silver trays of food. 100 candles flickered, their flames reflected in polished glass. Elena paused at the threshold, Leela clinging to her side. She could feel the eyes turning toward her, scanning her velvet dress, her fuller frame, her deliberate confidence. She knew how they judged Hertha-in-laws who whispered that Marcus could have married someone slimmer, wealthier, more polished. But none of that mattered tonight. "Look who's finally here," came a voice smooth with condescension. Regina Harris, Marcus's sister, glided forward in a sequined gown. At 42, Regina was striking, her figure slim, and her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "We thought you'd gotten lost." Elena returned the smile, though hers was heavier. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Marcus appeared behind his sister, tall, broad-shouldered, handsome in his tailored suit. He kissed Elena's cheek, perfunctory and cool. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. But Elena felt the steel wall between them. His betrayal, the one she had uncovered months ago, burned like acid every time he touched her. "Dinner will be ready soon," Marcus announced, steering guests toward the dining room. His voice carried authority, the tone of a man used to control. Elena followed, her heart thundering. Every step felt like a countdown. The dining table stretched endlessly, laden with roasted meats, casseroles, and pies. Crystal glasses sparkled with red wine. Family members chatted about business, politics, the year's successes. Laughter rose and fell like waves. Elena barely tasted her food. She watched Marcus at the head of the table, commanding attention with his stories. She watched Regina rolling her eyes at anything that did not revolve around her. She watched the others' uncles, cousins, in-laws feeding off the illusion of perfection. And then Elena cleared her throat. The sound was soft, but it silenced the table more effectively than a clap of thunder. Every eye turned toward her. She gripped her wineglass, knuckles pale, and rose slowly to her feet. "I know Christmas Eve is supposed to be a time for joy," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. But sometimes the truth can't wait until morning. Marcus frowned. Alina, what are you? Don't. She cut him off, her voice sharp now. Don't pretend you don't know. A ripple of whispers stirred the table. Elena's chest rose and fell. Her eyes swept the room, meeting each gaze, daring them to look away. This family has been hiding too much for too long. Lies, betrayal, cruelty, and I won't be silent anymore. Gasps, murmurs, an audible clatter of a fork hitting porcelain. Lila stared at her mother, wide-eyed. Regina leaned forward, eager for drama. Marcus's face hardened, jaw tightening like stone. Alina, he said, his voice low, dangerous, sit down. But she did not sit. Do you think I didn't know? She demanded. Do you think I didn't see what you've been doing? Marcus, the affairs, the manipulation, the money siphoned from the company. You've paraded yourself as a leader, a husband, a father, but you're nothing but a liar. The room erupted in noise, shouts of denial, gasps of shock, chairs scraping back. Marcus slammed his hand against the table. Enough. But Elena's voice rose above the chaos. No, it's not enough. Not until everyone knows the truth. Not until this family sees the man behind the mask. Her words hung in the air, heavy and electric. The candles seemed to flicker harder, as though the fire itself fed on the storm she had unleashed. Marcus stood, towering over her, his face dark with rage. But Alina, rooted in her place, did not waver. This was only the beginning. And as the storm gathered in that glittering dining room, the Harris family's perfect Christmas Eve began to unravel, till the room did not recover easily for a long, breathless moment. The only sounds were the crackle of the fireplace and the nervous clinking of crystal glasses against trembling hands. The great dining hall, decorated with glittering garlands and flickering candles, suddenly felt like a stage drenched in smoke, and Alina Harris stood at its center. 39 years old, her body full and strong. She looked like a woman carved from resolve itself. Her velvet dress caught the candlelight, but her steady eyes, dark, gleaming, unyielding, drew every gaze. Say that again, Marcus hissed, his baritone trembling with fury. In front of them, Elena's lips tightened into a line. You heard me. Regina, his sister, leaned forward eagerly, her sequined gown catching the firelight. What is she talking about, Marcus? Affairs, money. Her voice was high-pitched like a hawk circling carrion. Marcus's mother, Lorraine, gasped audibly, one manicured hand pressed to her pearls. This is Christmas Eve, she whispered, scandalized. Elena, how could you bring such filth into our home tonight of all nights? Elena's chest burned, but she did not shrink. Because lies don't take holidays, Lorraine, and neither does pain. The table splintered into voices. Uncles murmured accusations, cousins leaned forward in fascination, and a few in-laws excused themselves entirely, muttering about not being involved in family drama. The sound rose like the drone of bees, until Marcus slammed both fists on the table. Glasses toppled, wine bled across linen like fresh blood. Quiet, he thundered. The noise cut off instantly. Marcus turned back to Alina, his towering figure shaking with restrained violence, his suit strained against his broad shoulders as he pointed a finger at her. You come into my family's home and humiliate me. On this night, you dare. His tone was venom. I dare, Alina said, lifting her chin. She was terrified inside, her pulse raged, her palms slick with sweat, but outwardly she held steady. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind too many times to falter now. Because the truth needs a witness. Because your daughter deserves better than a father who hides behind a mask. The name daughter struck harder than any accusation. Lila, seated 2 chairs down, shifted uneasily. At 16, still soft with youth, but with her mother's strong cheeks, she had grown up idolizing her father. Now, confusion painted her face like a storm cloud. What are you saying? Lila whispered, voice small but cutting through the silence. Alina turned to her, her eyes softened, but she did not break. I'm saying you deserve to know who your father really is. The women, the money he's taken from the company, stolen from workers' wages to fund his habits, the power games he plays with everyone, including me. Lila's lips parted in horror. Regina's laughter pierced the room like shattered glass. This is priceless, she sneered. I always knew you were a drama queen, Alina, but to invent such stories on Christmas Eve, it's pathetic. They're not stories, Alina said, her voice firm. I have proof. A murmur rose like thunder, rolling across the table. Proof, the word hung in the air like a spark begging for fuel. Marcus's face darkened to crimson. You will not do this, he growled. Not here, not ever. His hand twitched as though he longed to seize her wrist, drag her out of the room, silence her by force, but the weight of a dozen watching eyes restrained him. He was a master of appearances, and violence would shatter the perfect portrait he'd painted for decades. Alina could almost hear the gears turning behind his tight jaw. His rage was a beast pacing in a cage, but the cage was built of reputation and pride. He couldn't let it break, not yet. So Marcus smiled. The sudden curve of his lips was more chilling than his fury. "My dear wife," he said smoothly, "is unwell. The stress of the year has been too much for her. You all know she's struggled. Let's not take her words as gospel. She needs rest, not judgment." He spoke as though soothing a frightened child, his voice a velvet glove hiding claws. Elena's fists clenched at her sides. "Do not dismiss me like I'm crazy," she snapped. "I have the receipts, bank statements, messages, photographs. Do you want me to bring them here and scatter them across this table?" She gestured toward the roasted meats and glistening pies. "Let's see how they look next to your precious feast." Regina's mouth opened, then shut again. For once, she had no retort. The room's balance had shifted, and everyone felt it. Marcus's mask cracked us for a breath, but long enough for Alina to see the fear. He recovered quickly, plastering charm back onto his face, but the damage was done. His family saw it too. A sliver of doubt lodged into the cracks of their loyalty. Lorraine rose, her pearls trembling against her chest. "Enough of this circus," she snapped, her matriarchal authority filling the room. "Marcus is my son, and I will not sit here and let his wife disgrace him in front of family." Alina turned on her. "You think protecting him protects this family? It doesn't. It destroys it. Every time you close your eyes, every time you excuse his sins, you feed the rot." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Even the candles seemed to flicker lower, their flames devoured by the tension. Then came a voice Alina hadn't expected. "I believe her." It was Uncle Harold, Marcus's uncle from Chicago, a man with a booming laugh and a sharp business mind. His gray mustache quivered as he spoke, but his eyes were steady. "I've seen the numbers in the company books. Money's been disappearing for months. Marcus, you never explained it. Maybe Elena's telling the truth." Shock rippled across the table. Marcus's mask fell away entirely now, replaced by cold fury. His gaze snapped between his wife and his uncle like a predator deciding which prey to devour first. Elena's breath caught in her throat. For the first time, all night, she felt not alone but seen. She pressed her palms flat on the table, leaning forward, voice low but ringing clear. "This is just the beginning. You can glare at me all you want. Marcus, you can try to silence me, but the truth is out now, and you can't bury it. Not anymore." Marcus leaned in close, his whisper venomous enough to cut through bone. "You don't know what you've started." But Alina smiled faintly, though her heart trembled. "Yes, I do." The cracks had begun to spread across the Harris family's perfect glass, and glass, once fractured, never mends the same. The storm did not break that night, but it brewed in silence, spreading like cracks in frozen glass. After Elena's revelations, the Christmas Eve dinner had dissolved into fragments. Conversations turned into sharp whispers. Accusations lingered in the air, and the once magnificent feast lay untouched, congealing under the candlelight. Guests excused themselves early, coats pulled tight, eyes darting nervously as if afraid the walls themselves might burst open with secrets. By midnight, the grand Harris mansion stood eerily quiet, its cheer extinguished. Alina sat in the back seat of her aging sedan, parked at the bottom of the mansion's driveway. Snow tapped gently on the windshield. Beside her, Leela hugged her coat to her chest, staring out the window at the mansion's glowing silhouette. "Mom," Leela said finally, her voice hoarse, "is it all true?" The words pierced deeper than any accusation Marcus had hurled at her. Alina turned slowly, her heart breaking at the fear and confusion etched on her daughter's face. "Yes, baby," she whispered, every word. Lila's lips trembled. "But he's my dad. He's supposed to." She trailed off, tears slipping down her cheeks. Alina pulled her close, wrapping her arms around the girl's trembling shoulders. Her own body was sturdy, built like a fortress, and tonight she needed to be exactly that. "I know," she murmured into her daughter's curls. "He's supposed to protect us, but sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us, and we can't stay silent when that happens." Leela's sobs shook against her chest. Alina closed her eyes, stroking her daughter's hair, and let her own tears fall silently. She knew the war had only begun. Back inside the mansion, Marcus stood alone in the dining room. The candles had burned down 2 stubs, their wax pooling across the linen tablecloth. The remnants of the feast looked grotesque in the half-light. His fists rested on the table, shoulders hunched, jaw clenched tight. Regina slinked into the room, still dazzling in sequins, though her smirk had faded. "Well," she said softly, "that was quite the performance." Marcus didn't answer. His dark eyes were fixed on nothing. "She made you look weak," Regina pressed, circling him like a vulture. "In front of everyone, you should have shut her down harder." At last, Marcus spoke. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay steel. "She thinks she's clever. She thinks she can embarrass me into submission. But she has no idea who she's dealing with." Regina arched a brow. "Then what are you going to do?" Marcus finally looked up, his smile a predator's curve. "Whatever it takes." The next morning, Elena awoke to the sound of her phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. She blinked against the gray light seeping through the curtains, her body heavy with exhaustion. Leela still slept curled beside her, face pressed into the blanket. Elena reached for the phone. Dozens of messages lit the screen, family members demanding explanations, friends forwarding whispers already spreading through town, even church acquaintances politely inquiring whether everything was all right at home. Her stomach knotted. The story had already escaped the mansion. She slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake Leela, and padded into the kitchen. The house felt colder than usual, though the heater hummed. She wrapped her robe tighter around her soft frame and sat at the table, staring at the phone as though it were an enemy. One message stood out. It was from Uncle Harold. *, if you have proof, bring it to me. We'll deal with this properly. *, her hands trembled. Proof. She had it, tucked away in a manila folder hidden behind cookbooks in the pantry. Bank statements, printed messages, photographs Marcus thought he had deleted. She had collected it piece by piece, her heart breaking with every discovery, until the weight of silence became unbearable. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her breath. She couldn't back down now. Later that afternoon, Elena sat across from Harold in his downtown office. He was a large man, his gray mustache bristling as he leafed through the documents she spread across the desk. His brows furrowed deeper with every page. "My God," he muttered, "it's worse than I thought. The siphoned money alone. If the board sees this, Marcus is finished." Elena clasped her hands tightly in her lap. "He can't be allowed to keep getting away with it. Not with the company. Not with our family." Harold leaned back, exhaling heavily. "This won't be easy. Marcus has allies, powerful ones. If we move too quickly, he'll bury us before we can blink." Elena swallowed hard. She had always known Marcus was dangerous, but hearing it spoken aloud chilled her. "Then, what do we do?" Harold's gaze softened. "We gather more, enough to make it undeniable. And Elena," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "you need to be careful. Marcus won't forgive this." She nodded slowly, her throat tight. She had already felt Marcus's fury last night, but fear was no longer enough to stop her. That evening, Elena sat on the couch with Leela, sipping cocoa while snow fell heavy outside. The Christmas tree lights blinked gently in the corner, their cheer a cruel contrast to the weight in her chest. "Mom," Lila asked, her voice small, "what happens now?" Elena looked at her daughter, her heart aching at the innocence still clinging to her. She set down her mug, took Leela's hands in hers, and spoke with all the strength she could muster. "Now, baby, we fight. We don't let the lies win, no matter how hard it gets." Leela nodded, though her eyes were wet. "I'm scared." Elena pulled her into her arms again, her sturdy body a shield against the storm. She was scared too terrified, but she could not let it show. Not for Leela, because the cracks had spread, and soon the entire facade would come crashing down. The days after Christmas blurred into a haze of whispers and shadows. Brookhaven was a small town, and small towns thrived on rumor. By the morning of December 27th, everyone had heard some version of what had happened at the Harris mansion on Christmas Eve. Some said Elena had had a breakdown. Others insisted Marcus had been exposed for stealing from his own company. The truth, as always, twisted itself through the grapevine until it was unrecognizable. But for Elena 39, the truth had never been clearer. She woke each morning with the weight of her choice pressing on her chest, heavier than the winter blankets wrapped around her. She had started a war. There was no taking it back. On the third day, Marcus came to her door. Elena was in the kitchen, her full frame bent over the counter as she chopped vegetables for soup. The rhythmic sound of the knife steadied her nerves. Lila was at the table, hunched over homework, earbuds in. Outside, snow drifted lazily across the gray sky. The knock was sharp, commanding. Elena froze, the knife hovering above the cutting board. She knew that knocked at her heart, thudded painfully as she wiped her hands on a towel and went to the door. She opened it to find Marcus standing tall, broad shoulders, wrapped in a black wool coat, his eyes hard as flint. "Elena," he said, his voice low, controlled. "We need to talk." She didn't move. The cold air rushed between them, stinging her cheeks. "There's nothing left to say." His jaw tightened. "If you don't let me in, you'll regret it." Her grip on the doorknob faltered. For a moment she considered slamming it in his face, but she saw Leela's reflection in the kitchen window behind her, curious, worried on. Something inside her shifted. She couldn't let this confrontation happen in front of their daughter. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp, "but not here. Meet me at the cafe on Main Street, tomorrow at noon." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Running the show now, are you?" Elena straightened, her sturdy frame filling the doorway like a fortress. "Yes, I am." For the first time, she saw hesitation flicker across his face. Then he turned, without a word, disappearing into the snow. The next day, Elena dressed carefully, a navy blue sweater that hugged her curves, simple earrings, boots polished, despite their age. She wanted to look steady, unshaken. She wanted Marcus to see that she was not the timid wife he thought he could control. The cafe was nearly empty when she arrived. The smell of roasted coffee beans clung to the air, and snowmelt puddled on the floor by the door. Marcus was already there, seated at a corner booth, his hands folded on the table like a man about to negotiate a business deal. She slid into the seat across from him. The tension between them was a living thing, thick and suffocating. "You've humiliated me," Marcus began without preamble. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "Do you know what people are saying? Do you know what this has done to the company?" Elena met his gaze evenly. "What you did to the company is your fault, not mine." His lips curved into a cold smile. "You think you've won something, but you don't understand how this game works. You've drawn blood, Elena. That means there's no going back." She leaned forward, her voice low, firm. "Good, because I don't want to go back. I want the truth out. I want you held accountable." For a moment, Marcus just stared at her, studying the woman across from him. Then he chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You always underestimated me. Do you think you can beat me? A housewife with a file folder of papers." Elena's chest rose and fell, her breath trembling but her eyes steady. "I don't have to beat you alone. Harold believes me. Others will too. The cracks are already there. Marcus, you can't cover them all." The smile faded from his lips. His expression hardened, chilling the air around him. "You don't know what you've started," he repeated, his voice a whisper, edged with steel. "But I promise you this, you won't like how it ends." He stood abruptly, the legs of the chair scraping against the floor, and left without another word. Elena sat frozen, her heart pounding, her hands clenched in her lap. She had expected threats, but hearing them aloud, so precise, so venomous, left her shaken. Still, deep inside, a spark of defiance flared. He could not silence her, not anymore. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house creak under the weight of winter. Leela slept soundly down the hall, her breathing soft and even. The silence pressed heavy on Elena's chest. She rose quietly, padded into the living room, and sat by the window. Snow fell thick outside, coating the world in white. It looked peaceful, almost pure. But Elena knew better. Beneath the snow, rot still festered. Her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up and found another message from Harold. Asterisk, "We'll need more evidence. Something undeniable. Can you get it?" Asterisk, Elena's throat tightened. Could she? Marcus was dangerous. He was careful, but she had already come this far. Turning back was no longer an option. She typed her reply with trembling fingers. "Yes, I'll get it." Then she set the phone down, pressed her forehead against the cold window glass, and whispered into the night, "I won't let you win, Marcus. Not this time." The storm was no longer just cracks in the glass. It was gathering strength, ready to shatter everything. The first week of January carried no sense of new beginnings for Elena. While the world clung to resolutions and whispered promises of change, she moved through the days with a taut string of dread stretched inside her. Every glance over her shoulder, every unknown number flashing on her phone, carried the weight of Marcus's warning. "You won't like how it ends." Yet she pressed forward, on a frigid Tuesday morning. Elena met Harold at his office downtown. The old building creaked with the kind of history that smelled faintly of mildew and dust. But Harold's office glowed with warmth, a pot of coffee steaming on a side table, stacks of papers neatly aligned on his desk. He rose when she entered, his lined face breaking into a worried smile. "Elena," he said softly, "you look worn." "I've been better." Her laugh came brittle, the sound of porcelain chipping. "But I'm still standing." She settled into the chair opposite him, her full frame sinking against the worn leather. The years had given Harold a kindness that steadied her, but tonight even his calm presence felt insufficient. She clutched her purse tightly, the folder of documents inside pressing against her side like a secret heartbeat. "What I have," she began, lowering her voice, "isn't enough. Marcus will bury me in counterclaims if I don't bring something stronger." Harold leaned back, his fingers steepled. "And you think you can get it?" She nodded, though her chest tightened with doubt. "I lived in that house for 15 years. I know where he hides things. I just need the courage to go back." A silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock. Harold's eyes softened. "Then you'll need help. Don't try this alone." But Elena knew there were some paths a woman had to walk by herself, especially when the shadows were of her own making. That night, she stood outside the Harris mansion for the first time since Christmas Eve. Snow glistened in the moonlight, muffling the world into a soundless dream. The house loomed, tall and proud, its windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. Her breath came in short clouds, and her heart thundered against her ribs. She knew the alarm codes, the hidden spare keys, the ways Marcus thought himself untouchable. 15 years of marriage had taught her every blind spot. She slipped inside with practiced ease, her boots soundless on the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of cedar and cologne. Memories pressed against her from every corner, laughter around the fireplace, Lila's first steps across the rug, Marcus's voice sharp in arguments that echoed too loudly through the halls. She swallowed the ache rising in her throat. This wasn't home anymore. This was enemy territory. She moved swiftly to his study. The mahogany desk stood like an altar to his power-gleaming wood, brass fixtures, perfectly ordered files. Elena's hands shook as she pulled open drawers, rifling through papers, receipts, contracts, letters each, one more incriminating than the last. She stuffed them into her folder with quick, trembling movements. Then her eyes caught a small locked box at the back of the bottom drawer. Her pulse surged. She remembered at a box Marcus never let her touch. She dug into her purse, retrieved a hairpin, and fumbled with the lock until it clicked open. Inside lay a collection of USB drives and handwritten notes. She flipped one open and froze. Numbers, dates, offshore accounts, transfers and names she didn't recognize. Proof, hard, undeniable proof. Her throat tightened. She had found the weapon she needed, but a sound behind her made her spin. Elena Marcus's voice cut through the dark. He stood in the doorway, broad and immovable, his silhouette framed by the dim light from the hall. His eyes glinted like shards of glass. "I wondered how long it would take before you came back here." Her breath caught, and for a moment she felt like the woman she used to be, the one who flinched under his voice, who folded at his commands. But she clutched the folder to her chest, forcing steel into her spine. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she whispered. Marcus stepped forward, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You should be." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them, the snow outside falling like a shroud over the night. Then Elena moved. She brushed past him with surprising strength, the folder clutched tight in her arms. He didn't stop her, not yet. His laugh followed her down the hall, dark and mocking. "Run, if you want, Elena, but remember, ashes don't escape the fire." Back home, she locked the door and slid down against it, her chest heaving. The folder sat on the floor beside her, a small pile of paper and plastic that could burn Marcus's empire to the ground. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in years, she felt the faint spark of hope, but alongside it came the chilling echo of Marcus's laugh, rattling in her bones like chains. The battle lines were drawn now. There was no turning back. Elena hadn't felt adrenaline like this since she was a girl. Her blood pulsed hot, sharp, as if carrying both fear and power in equal measure. The folder sat on her kitchen table, a weapon more dangerous than any blade. Each document, each USB drive, was a spark waiting to ignite. But the fire it would start could scorch her life as easily as Marcus's. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she brewed pot after pot of coffee, her dark eyes fixed on the stack of evidence. She thought of Lila, barely 16, caught in the crosshairs of a war she hadn't asked for. Elena's sturdy frame trembled as she clasped her daughter's photo in one hand and the evidence in the other. When dawn finally cracked through the blinds, Elena made a decision. The truth couldn't wait. By mid-morning, Harold sat in her kitchen, his glasses perched on his nose as he sifted through the files, his brow furrowed deeper with every page. "Elena," he said finally, his voice low, "this is monumental. Offshore accounts, forged contracts, false audits. This isn't just fraud, it's conspiracy." Her stomach knotted. "So it's enough. It's enough to bury him," Harold admitted, leaning back in his chair. "But once we move forward, there's no undoing it. Marcus will unleash hell on you." On Leela. Elena's breath shuddered, but her eyes didn't waver. "He already did. Now it's my turn." Harold studied her, then nodded slowly. "We'll need allies, a reporter, maybe, someone who can shine light before Marcus smothers us in the dark." Elena thought of the people she once avoided at parties, the journalists Marcus dismissed with mocking laughter. The idea of inviting them in terrified her, but what terrified her more was silence. That evening, Elena met Harold's contact at a small diner on the edge of town. The reporter, Tessa Moore, was a woman in her late 30s, sharp-eyed and restless, with ink-stained fingers and a voice that carried conviction. "I've been chasing Marcus Harris for years," Tessa said, sliding into the booth opposite Elena. "No one's been brave enough to stand up, until now." Elena wrapped her hands around her mug of coffee, the steam warming her face. "Bravery isn't what this is," she admitted quietly. "It's desperation." Tessa's gaze softened. "Desperation can topple empires if it has the right fuel." "Do you have proof?" Elena slid the folder across the table. Tessa opened it, her eyes widening as she skimmed the pages. She whistled under her breath. "This is dynamite." "No," Elena corrected, her voice firm. "This is justice." For a moment, the three women, Lena, Harold, Tessa, sat in silence, bound by an unspoken vow. The storm was gathering, and together, they would walk straight into it. Marcus struck first. 2 days later, Elena's car was vandalized in her driveway, windshield smashed, tires slashed. A dead crow lay on the hood, its wings splayed grotesquely. Leela found it when she came home from school, her scream echoing down the block. Elena rushed out, pulling her daughter into her arms. Lila clung to her, sobbing, her body shaking. "Mom, what's happening? Who would do this?" Elena swallowed the truth. "Someone trying to scare us," she said softly, stroking her daughter's hair. "But they won't win, I promise." Inside, though, her resolve hardened. Marcus wasn't just sending warnings, he was declaring war. That night, Elena drafted her first statement with Tessa's guidance. Her words were raw, unpolished, but they carried the weight of a woman who had endured too much to remain silent. For years, Marcus Harris built his empire on lies. I know, because I lived beside him, watched him, suffered under the shadow of his deceit. The truth is here. The time for fear is over. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Within hours, the statement appeared on Tessa's news site, alongside the first fragments of evidence. The article spread quickly, whispers turning to shouts, Brookhaven buzzing with speculation. Marcus didn't take long to respond. By morning, his lawyer delivered a cease and desist order to Elena's door, followed by a glossy press release dismissing her as a bitter, unstable ex-wife fabricating stories for attention. Elena read the words aloud in her kitchen, her hands trembling, her cheeks burning with rage. "Unstable," she repeated bitterly. "Is that what I am to him? A woman too weak to be believed?" Harold placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let him underestimate you. That will be his downfall." Elena's reflection in the window caught her eye-round face, tired eyes, thick arms braced against the counter. She looked nothing like the heroines of movies or novels. But maybe that was the point. Maybe justice needed women like her, imperfect, bruised, but unbroken. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and whispered to her reflection, "I will not stop." The storm had broken, and its winds tore at every seam of Elena's life, but she no longer hid from it. She walked straight into its heart, carrying fire in her hands. The articles spread like wildfire. By the second week of January, Brookhaven's tidy facades could no longer hide the cracks. Neighbors whispered in grocery aisles. Business partners canceled lunches. Elena's name was on everyone's lips, some with admiration, others with venom. But Marcus was not a man to sit idle. Elena was in the kitchen when Harold called. His voice was clipped, urgent. "Elena, You need to be careful. Marcus filed an emergency injunction against you this morning. He's demanding custody of Leila, claiming you're unfit. He's painting you as unstable, reckless. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against the counter, the phone slick in her hand. He's trying to take my daughter. Yes, Harold said grimly. And he has the resources to make it stick if we're not vigilant. Elena's round face flushed with anger. Over my dead body. She hung up and found Lila in the living room, earbuds in, humming softly. Elena sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. Sweetheart, she said carefully, things may get harder before they get better, but I need you to trust me. I won't let him take you away. Lila looked up, her brown eyes wide. I do trust you, Ma, always. It was enough to steady her. For now, Marcus's counterattack didn't end there. 2 nights later, Elena left the grocery store with a bag of essentials when she noticed a dark SUV idling across the lot. Her breath quickened as she loaded bags into the trunk. The engine roared, headlights flaring, and for a terrifying second she thought it would lurch toward her. Instead, it crept past slowly, the driver's face obscured by shadow. A warning, a reminder. Elena stood frozen, groceries clutched in trembling arms, until the taillights disappeared into the night. She knew Marcus was tightening the noose. At Harold's urging, Elena and Tessa convened again at the diner. Tessa's notepad brimmed with details, her sharp eyes darting as Elena recounted the SUV, the vandalism, the legal ambush. This isn't just intimidation, Tessa said. He's building a narrative painting you as paranoid, unhinged. If we don't stay ahead, the public will believe him. Elena gripped her coffee mug, the heat searing her palms. Then we give them the truth faster. We go bigger. We release the offshore accounts, the shell companies, all of it. Harold frowned. That's risky. Once it's out, Marcus will know exactly how much you have. He'll strike harder. Elena leaned forward, her expression fierce, the lines of fatigue etched deep into her face. He already struck. He came for my daughter. That means there's no room left for fear. Tessa studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, let's light the fire. The next morning, Tessa's expos hit the front page of Brookhaven's biggest paper. Detailed records of Marcus's fraud stretched across columns, accompanied by screenshots of transfers and contracts Elena had uncovered. The headlines screamed, asterisk, local tycoon built empire on fraud. Sources say, asterisk, the town buzzed with shock, disbelief, outrage. Investors panicked. Associates distanced themselves. And Marcus, he struck back with fury. By nightfall, Elena's phone lit with anonymous messages. Liar, traitor, you'll regret this. One even read, accidents happen. Her breath caught at that one. She checked the locks twice before bed, then sat awake long into the night, listening to every creak and groan of the house. The storm had shifted. It was no longer whispers and threats. It was a battle for survival. And Marcus had just raised the stakes. The courthouse loomed gray and unforgiving against a sky heavy with storm clouds. By the morning of the hearing, Brookhaven had become a town divided, half believing Marcus's polished denials, half whispering that Elena's courage had finally exposed a monster. Elena stood on the courthouse steps, her thick coat wrapped tight around her, Leila's hand clasped firmly in her own. She was 40 now, heavier than she'd ever been, her body softened by years of labor and grief, but her presence was iron. Her dark eyes blazed with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She no longer saw herself as the timid wife caged in Marcus's shadow. She was the woman who had brought him here. Mom, Leila whispered, her voice trembling. Are we going to be okay? Elena bent down, cupping her daughter's face. We will be, she said, steady as stone, because the truth is stronger than his lies. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Marcus sat at the defense table, perfectly groomed in a tailored suit, his smile confident, almost smug. His lawyers surrounded him like soldiers, stacks of files at the ready. When his gaze met Elena's, he smirked, as if this was merely another business meeting he intended to dominate. But Elena wasn't alone. Harold sat beside her, calm and deliberate, and Tessa occupied the press bench with her notebook ready, her eyes sharp as knives. The air carried the electricity of a storm waiting to break. The judge called the session to order. Marcus's lawyers moved swiftly, painting Elena as unstable, desperate, a spurned ex-wife, inventing a story to tarnish a successful man. Their words cut like glass. Asterisk, unfit mother, paranoid delusions, financial motives. Alina clenched her fists under the table. Each word felt like a stone hurled at her chest, but she refused to bow her head. When Harold rose to present their evidence, the room shifted. He laid out the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the false audits. He moved methodically, each piece fitting together into a picture, too damning to dismiss. Then came the USB drives, their contents projected onto the screen. Emails with Marcus's signature, coded transfers, instructions to bury debts. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. For the first time, Marcus's smile faltered. Alina Harris, Harold said, gesturing toward her, is not a bitter woman, inventing lies. She is a mother who risked everything to bring the truth into the light. What you see before you is not vengeance, it is justice. Marcus stood, demanding to speak. His voice, once commanding, now rang with a brittle edge. He dismissed the documents as fabrications, the emails as forgeries. Harold, as a washed-up attorney grasping at relevance, his words grew louder, harsher, until the judge rapped his gavel to restore order. Alina watched him unravel. The man who had once towered over her, now reduced to flailing in public view. Her chest tightened with a mix of grief and vindication. She had loved him once, believed in him, built a life beside him, and now she watched that life burn. When the judge finally spoke, his words cut clean through the noise. Given the evidence presented, the court finds sufficient cause to pursue formal charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy against Marcus Harris. Custody of Leila Harris will remain solely with her mother, Alina Harris. Gasps filled the room. Marcus's face twisted, his fists clenching against the table. For a heartbeat, Alina feared he might lunge across the aisle. But he only sat back down, his chest heaving, his empire crumbling around him. Outside, the storm finally broke. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, questions flying. Alina stood on the courthouse steps, her daughter beside her, Harold at her shoulder. Snow swirled in the air, cold against her flushed cheeks. She raised her chin, speaking not to the cameras, but to the town itself, to every woman who had ever been silenced. The truth always comes through, she said, her voice steady, no matter how much power tries to bury it. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some jeering, but Alina no longer cared. She had survived the fire. She had faced Marcus and lived to tell the story. As she walked down the steps with Leila's hand in hers, Alina knew the road ahead would not be easy. The storm had left scars that would take years to heal. But for the first time in decades, she felt free. And freedom, she realized, was worth every ember, every ash.